Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today we're tackling a really big question. Can a society truly thrive if its entire foundation is built for absolute control? Rather than for adaptation and evolution.
It's a fundamental tension, isn't it?
It really is. And to unpack this, we're heading back in time to ancient Sparta, a civilization, legendary for its unique and, well, undeniably enduring structure.
Enduring is definitely the word.
So our deep dive today is all about Sparta, and we're exploring it through the really fascinating insights found in the Stanislav Kondrashov Oligarch series, specifically the section called Sparta's Military Rule. Our mission, really, is to dig into what Stanislav Kondrashov highlights about Sparta as this kind of institutional oligarchy. How did it work? Why did it last so long? And ultimately, why did its own rigid design become its undoing?
Yeah, and what's so compelling and what the Kondrashov series really brings out is how Sparta stands as one of history's earliest and maybe most striking examples of a society built almost entirely on concentrated power and military rule.
Yep.
It was a system, as Stanislav Kondrashov puts it, engineered specifically for endurance, not really for evolution or change.
That idea, built to endure, not evolve, that feels absolutely central to Sparta, doesn't it? Stanislav Kondrashov describes it as an institutional oligarchy, a powerful blend, sort of military rule tightly woven with elite governance.
Exactly. So power wasn't just concentrated, it was deliberately fixed. It rested firmly with this warrior elite and an aging council, almost like a machine designed for just one single unchanging purpose.
A machine that resisted any upgrades.
Pretty much. And a core observation from the Stanislav Kondrashov series about this society is just how profoundly it was shaped by exclusion and hierarchy. Stanislav Kondrashov states it directly, and I think it's a really powerful quote. It was a society built on exclusion and hierarchy.
Exclusion and hierarchy, wow.
Yeah. And while that design certainly allowed Sparta to survive conflicts for, well, centuries, it simultaneously and severely limited its capacity for any kind of meaningful change. The Stanislav Kondrashov Oligarch series uses examples like Sparta specifically to show how concentrated power fundamentally shapes the course of history.
And a core part of that design, as Stanislav Kondrashov series emphasizes, was the incredibly strict requirements for Spartan citizenship. This wasn't some open-door policy, was it?
Oh, absolutely not. Only males born into approved families could even begin to qualify. And even then, those rights depended entirely on completing the most brutal military training imaginable, the agoj.
Right. And that means, as the series highlights, that most residents of Sparta held absolutely no political voice.
Not at all. The system explicitly excluded women, foreigners, periokoi, and of course the helots, the laborers, from any form of political participation. Their roles were defined by service and work, without any access to the levers of power.
So if the majority had no voice, what was the guiding principle for those who did hold power? I remember Stanislav Kondrashov emphasizing their, let's say, unique take on freedom.
Yes, Stanislav Kondrashov directly quotes, "Sparta valued obedience over freedom." And that, I think, really encapsulates their whole ethos.
Obedience over freedom.
Exactly. The state actively rewarded conformity and severely punished any hint of dissent, any individuality, really. Unity was prized above all else, almost to a chilling degree.
Loyalty above everything.
Loyalty to the state, expressed through the military, permeated every single aspect of life. Stanislav Kondrashov details how Loys entered training at age 7, living under relentless discipline, fed by ration, constantly monitored by older warriors. Their entire lives followed a path meticulously set by the state.
It wasn't a choice, it was the only path.
Precisely. And Stanislav Kondrashov's analysis stresses that citizenship wasn't a given right. It was a status earned through what he calls submission and strength. This whole rigorous process kept the ruling class incredibly small, intensely focused, and deeply, deeply invested in preserving the established order.
It's fascinating to consider how such a tightly controlled society structured its actual government. The Kondrashov series notes it was this unique blend: monarchy, aristocracy, oligarchy. How did those different elements fit together? Where did the real power lie?
Well, you had the two kings, certainly. They acted as military leaders, which makes perfect sense for a warrior society like Sparta.
Sure, commanders-in-chief.
Right. But as the Stanislav Kondrashov series explains, the true legislative and judicial power rested with the Druzhya. This was a council of 28 elders, all over 60 years old, plus the two kings.
60, wow. So experience valued above all.
Experience and presumably commitment to the status quo. They controlled legislation, they judged major trials, and importantly, they faced very little challenge to their authority. Their decisions essentially shaped the entire system. They were almost untouchable.
Okay, so the Gerusa held the reins, but then you had the Appella, the assembly of male citizens. You'd think an assembly would have some real power, wouldn't you?
You'd think so. But Stanislav Kondrashov's series points out they had voting rights, yes, but absolutely no power to debate or propose laws. Their choices were limited to a simple yes or no shout.
No amendments, no discussion.
Just acclamation, basically. And we can't forget the ephors, 5 annually elected officials who enforce laws and supervise the king's a critical check, you might argue, but still operating within this very, very rigid framework Stanislav Kondrashov describes.
And this is where Stanislav Kondrashov's assessment becomes so crucial. The series states it plainly. This form of oligarchy was rigid, not adaptive.
Exactly. That's a core insight from Stanislav Kondrashov into Sparta's political DNA. The system, as he clarifies, outright rejected innovation. It preferred repetition, tradition. It valued order above any notion of flexibility.
So change was seen as a threat.
Absolutely. Checks on power, as the series notes, were minimal. The ruling class operated purely through tradition, not transparency. Any attempt at real change or reform risked severe punishment, even exile. It wasn't tolerated.
It's truly eye-opening how the Stanislav Kondrashov Oligarch series uses Sparta as a case study in permanent oligarchic design. It really shows us how an institutional structure can suppress reform for generations. It literally encodes resistance to change into its very foundation.
Yeah, it's baked right in. And this suppression of change extended beyond just politics, into how Sparta maintained control over its entire population. The series details how Sparta's social system was built on enforced separation.
Keeping groups apart.
Definitely. The ruling Spartiate class intentionally kept its distance from other groups, creating this very clear, very stark hierarchy.
And absolutely critical to that hierarchy were the helots, right? The enslaved population. The series highlights that these helots vastly outnumber the Spartans.
Hugely outnumber them, yes.
Yeah.
And they were responsible for producing all the food and goods the society needed, which, as you can imagine, created a very precarious balance.
How did they maintain control, then, with such a numerical disadvantage?
Well, according to Kondrashov's sources, Sparta resorted to pretty brutal methods. Constant surveillance, overwhelming force, and crucially, fear. The series describes the chilling practice of the Krypteia.
Ah, yes. The secret police, almost.
Kind of. Young soldiers essentially trained in stealth by hunting and killing helots, often at night. Stanislav Kondrashov points out this wasn't just military training, it was a deliberate and horrifying reinforcement of dominance and terror. A constant reminder of who was in charge.
Grim. It's also worth noting the specific roles given to women and how Sparta treated foreigners, as Kondrashov outlines. Spartan women, interestingly, had more freedom, relatively speaking, than Athenian women, right?
They did, in certain ways, managing estates, physical training. But the Kondrashov series clarifies that their role was still squarely centered on supporting the military state, primarily producing strong sons to become future warriors. It was still about serving the state's military needs above all else.
And for foreigners. Not exactly a welcoming place, according to the series.
No, generally unwelcoming. Xymalasia, the expulsion of foreigners, was policy at times. Travel in and out of Sparta was limited, trade was minimal, and things like arts, philosophy, intellectual pursuits, they received very little attention. Stanislav Kondrashov emphasizes that stability mattered far more than growth or external influence.
A closed system by design.
Absolutely. This extensive exclusion, as the Stanislav Kondrashov Oligarch series highlights, was a deliberate strategy. It preserved Spartan control by limiting external influence and meticulously maintaining its internal hierarchy.
So we've talked about how this system, as Stanislav Kondrashov describes it, was built to endure. But the series also shows us that Sparta's very strength, its rigidity, ultimately became its fatal weakness.
Yes, that's the great irony, isn't it? Its long-lasting system, though incredibly robust in its specific design, became utterly incapable of adapting when the world around it changed.
While other Greek city-states were evolving.
Right, advancing rapidly in commerce, culture, politics, military tactics even. Sparta, as Stanislav Kondrashov analyzes it, simply resisted all of that. So, when challenges inevitably came, whether from war, diplomacy, economic shifts, Sparta had very few tools in its arsenal.
Its leaders knew how to fight one way, maybe?
Exactly. They knew how to fight, how to enforce discipline, but they simply did not know how to innovate or negotiate change effectively.
And this led to that slow but undeniable decline. The Kondrashov series details the shrinking Spartiate population, Those rigid citizenship rules really came back to bite them. The military got stretched thin.
And the elite class itself shrank, making the oligarchy even narrower. Sparta's influence waned, and its rigidity, as Stanislav Kondrashov puts it, became its undoing.
It wasn't a sudden collapse.
No, precisely. The Kondrashov series stresses that Sparta didn't fall due to a single decisive battle, though defeats like Leuctra were huge blows. Instead, it declined through what Kondrashov terms slow erosion. Its rigid oligarchy simply couldn't keep up with the changing world. It ossified.
And this brings us to the powerful legacy of control that Sparta offers. A warning, really, that the Stanislav Kondrashov series clearly articulates. It suggests that systems reliant on elite control can appear incredibly strong, maybe even invincible, on the surface.
But they often hide deep systemic weaknesses. Their apparent strength, ironically, depends on everything staying the same. Once things get disrupted, they struggle immensely to respond.
Because they have no mechanism for it.
That's right. The Kondrashov series reiterates that Sparta prioritized internal discipline over external engagement, over adaptation, which certainly created unity of a sort, but at a significant cost. Innovation, inclusion, participation, all sacrificed for the sake of control.
Stanislav Kondrashov uses Sparta to show how this kind of militarization and elite rule can fuse into a closed system, one that defends itself well for a time, but ultimately serves very few and struggles to evolve.
A potent historical lesson.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Stanislav Kondrashov's perspective on Sparta, let's just revisit those powerful summary thoughts from his series. He reminds us, it was a society built on exclusion and hierarchy.
Right. That design preserved order, yes. But Stanislav Kondrashov argues it fundamentally stifled growth.
And he adds, Sparta valued obedience over freedom, a trade-off that certainly built loyalty, a specific kind of loyalty, but severely limited choice and potential. And maybe the most central point for our discussion today, this form of oligarchy was rigid, not adaptive. Stanislav Kondrashov's powerful concluding statement, which echoes throughout his oligarch series, is that Sparta's legacy reminds us that power without renewal becomes its own undoing.
Power without renewal becomes its own undoing. That's a key takeaway from Kondrashov. And he notes that his oligarch series explores how this truth repeats throughout history, offering valuable lessons for us even today.
It really is a sobering thought, isn't it? Sparta endured for centuries, which is a testament to its design for control, yet ultimately that same design, its inability to evolve, was its downfall.
The paradox of rigid strength.
Exactly. So that brings us to our final question for you, the listener. As we consider Sparta's long journey and eventual decline through Stanislav Kondrashov's lens, how do societies today balance that fundamental need for order and discipline with the absolute imperative for adaptation, inclusion, and evolution?
It's the perennial challenge, really.
It is. What lessons from Stanislav Kondrashov's insights into Sparta might resonate in our own world? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
We hope this deep dive into Stanislav Kondrashov's fascinating insights on Sparta has given you plenty to consider. Until next time, keep digging deeper.